everybody, Sarah here. So earlier this week I put a poll up on my community tab in YouTube asking which morph you guys would like to see a deep dive on next, and of the options most of you chose TerraZZO, so that is what we are going to talk about today. Before we start, I just wanted to remind everyone that the second edition of my book is available on my website again. If you purchase the first edition, you can get the second edition for free. There's a lot of really awesome updates in this book, so I highly recommend getting it while you can with that free code. If you do not have my book yet and you like content like this, you can get $5 off on my website between now and February 5th using the code TerraZZO at checkout. This $5 doesn't have to go to the book. You can get $5 off of anything on my website, including snakes, t-shirts, masks, anything on the website right now. So if you're interested in any of that stuff, please check it out. I have one more announcement to make before I jump into the meat and potatoes of this video. And that is that this channel was finally approved for membership. So if you would like to become a member of this channel, you can click join under any video. It's only $2. There's only one tier right now, and it's called the Neonate tier. And for those $2, you get to see any of the sort of behind the scenes videos, maybe personal videos, or just silly videos, or just maybe any videos that may not directly relate to corn snakes, but might be about other animals or other reptiles and stuff like that. So if you're really interested in seeing any extra content, that $2 goes a long way to help me continue this channel. I don't know if you've noticed, but I've gotten a lot of new stuff for the channel. I have a ring light and a whole bunch of other stuff that I'm working on, and those $2, like I said, can really go a long way to helping me out in improving this channel. The first members video that I put up earlier this week was a continuation of my snake rescue stories. So if you really enjoyed hearing the corn snake rescue stories, I have a bunch of other snake stories as well about ball pythons and stuff like that. So like I said, if you're interested in those, becoming a member is going to get you access to videos like that. Thank you for listening. We're going to jump into the video now. TerraZZO is a stripe-looking mutation in corn snakes that originated in the Florida Keys in the early to mid 1990s. Craig Boyd was the one who originally found them and started breeding them. It's not 100% clear if Craig Boyd is the one who proved it out as a mutation or if it was Jeff Galewood, because they were both doing it around the same time. But most people refer to the original line of TerraZZOs as the Boyd line, and Boyd was the one to originally name them as well. So we figure that Craig Boyd was actually the one who not only found it but also proved it to be inheritable. Craig's original name for this mutation was actually not TerraZZO, it was GRANITE. So a lot of you have probably heard the term GRANITE before if you're into corn snakes. GRANITE is now used as the term for the combination for the diffuse mutation and the Anery mutation, but originally GRANITE was used for this TerraZZO mutation instead. And so a lot of people will also call their lines original GRANITE when they're actually talking about TerraZZO. The TerraZZO mutation looks very similar to our stripe mutation, and it also sort of looks similar to Tessera. There's no pattern on the belly, it's blank like it would be with a motley or a stripe. It has two stripes that go from the neck all the way down to the tail, usually sort of vanishing or fading out toward the tail. As far as color schemes go, it ranges everywhere from a sort of light creamy color with orange stripes to orange with orange stripes. So you can kind of have that gradient, but they rarely get really red like most regular stripes do. So knowing the history and knowing what these snakes actually look like, I think one of the biggest questions is why are they so uncommon still? The original stripe mutation did originate about 5 to 10 years before TerraZZO did, but still TerraZZO originated at least 20 years ago, so why don't we see more of them? In a poll that I did on Facebook in the Corn Snake Morph ID group, which is a group that I admin, so if anybody's ever interested in learning about corn snake morphs or their own corn snakes, feel free to join that group. But in that group, I made a poll asking people, if you don't like TerraZZO, why? And I don't want to say overwhelming majority, but a good amount of people said they just simply don't like the way that they look. As I mentioned, TerraZZOs often stay lighter in color, and they don't often get that high saturation that we normally see with stripes. And most corn snake lovers love corn snakes because of the bright colors that you can get out of them. So when you have a mutation that looks very similar to a different mutation, or even a few different mutations, but it just doesn't really get that color, it's typically not going to be quite as popular. This is probably a similar reason to why dilute is also not very common, because it's not different really enough from the other hypomutations that do alter the color a little bit more, and it mutes the color. So not a whole lot of people really like having this mutation. Another reason why this mutation may not be quite as popular is because we do have so many other stripe mutations. We obviously have the regular old stripe mutation that, once again, it gets a little bit more brighter in color, but we also have a lot more variability with it and a lot more different lines of stripe that look a little bit different. We have sunspot, which makes little spots that go down the body. We also have cube, which is very similar to sunspot. We have vanishing stripes. And so you have a lot of options if you get just a regular stripe. As far as color and pattern go, but also it's going to be a little more difficult for breeders to sell a snake that's called TerraZZO instead of just stripe. Most customers are going to understand and recognize what stripe means, but they're not necessarily going to recognize and understand what TerraZZO means unless they're really into the hobby. On that poll that I shared on Facebook, there were actually kind of a high percentage of people that didn't even know what TerraZZO was when I asked, do you like TerraZZO, yes or no? A lot of people said, I don't even know what that is. So as you can imagine, it would be difficult for breeders to justify continuing to produce a mutation that looks very similar to multiple other mutations we have, but is also much less known and much less understood. And of course, not only do we have our typical stripe mutation, but as I mentioned, we have tessera as well, which can look very similar to TerraZZO, and it is dominant, so it's a lot easier to breed. You can get tesseras in the first generation instead of having to breed the F1s together to get F2s in order to get those visuals. And then there's also a stripe-looking pattern with motley. You can get pinstripe motleys, which, if you don't want a typical stripe and you don't really like tessera, people will often go for pinstripe motleys. Once again, they're more readily available, but they also can have those bright, bold colors that TerraZZO does not often get. Part of the reason that TerraZZO probably doesn't have as much color is because of its keys background. We talked about that a little bit. And once it's bred into other things, the color might be able to sort of be more vibrant. But even if we do give more vibrant TerraZZOs, I guess one of the biggest question is, will it matter at that point? Because people are so attached to stripe and tessera. We have so many different options for different stripe mutations. It might take a long time for TerraZZO to ever get popular, and it may not. Aside from all of these things, I do want to say that I do like TerraZZO as a mutation, and if I could justify breeding them and producing more of them, I probably would, but it's a similar thing to what I said earlier, where a lot of breeders are not going out of their way to have TerraZZO as a project simply because the colors aren't worth it and trying to sell them isn't worth it, but I do really like them, and I'm going to go ahead and show you some TerraZZO combinations that I think are really interesting. I do want to also let you guys know that all of the photos that are in this video, including the thumbnail, I got from iansvivarium.com, and I highly suggest that you go check them out. I'll link it down in the description below. They are probably the most comprehensive photo guide for corn snakes online. You can find photos of almost every single mutation and combination that's ever existed. So definitely go check them out and support them if you can. They are not sponsoring this or anything like that, but since I do use a lot of the photos from Ian's Vivarium in my videos, I definitely wanted to at least give them a shout out and send you guys in their direction. The first combination that I want to show you is the Amel TerraZZO. Now when you look at an Amel TerraZZO, especially compared to an Amel stripe, you may not really see much of a difference. And that's because Amel looks like very similar to TerraZZO as far as color goes. All you're doing is removing that melanin. And since TerraZZO is a very light colored mutation already, removing that melanin doesn't change a whole lot of the look. But I guess one of the biggest questions that you might ask is, how do we tell the difference between an Amel stripe and an Amel TerraZZO when they look so similar? And the answer is the stripes on the back of the head. So, or the stripes near the back of the head, I should say. So if you look behind right behind the head of a striped corn snake versus a TerraZZO corn snake, in almost every instance, the stripes are going to have a very separated head pattern from the actual stripes on their body. So if you look at the stripes that go down the body of a striped corn snake, they will be disconnected from the head pattern. The head pattern might look like kind of wings or something like that, or like a weird mask kind of look. But they are almost always going to be separated, whereas a TerraZZO's is not usually going to be separated. So if you see a snake that has stripes that go all the way up to the head pattern, it's probably not your typical stripe. Either there's going to be something else mixed in there, or it could be a TerraZZO, a tessera, or even some sort of pinstripe motley. But a stripe is typically going to have a separation there. So if you're wondering if your snake is either stripe or TerraZZO, maybe you have a project that has both in there, that's at least one indicator that I've noticed. The second combination that I want to show you is really where the color difference starts to stand out, and that is in caramel TerraZZO versus caramel stripe. Now you can see that caramel stripes still can get very, very vibrant in color, whereas caramel TerraZZOs are still very muted. They're almost like a gray-green color instead. I still think that the caramel TerraZZO looks really, really cool. Like, I love the way that that looks. I love most caramel mutations and how they look, so it's really probably not a surprise to any of you, but that is a huge difference between caramel stripe and caramel TerraZZO. The caramel stripes are just so much more vibrant usually than caramel TerraZZO gets. It's a very similar story with the next combination, and that is with charcoal. If you look at a charcoal TerraZZO, it's much more light gray and the colors are much more muted. Even the melanin is much more muted than usual. Whereas if you have a striped charcoal, you still get some of that like dark coloration in it.
Sorry that I tend to cut in a lot on these videos, but I wanted to show you pictures of the motley combination with TerraZZO that I found kind of by happenstance when looking for photos for this video. And I also wanted to mention a few of my quick thoughts when I was looking for these photos, and that is TerraZZO seems to be very visually dominant over other pattern mutations that it's mixed with, and I just think that that's really cool. And when I say visually dominant, I obviously don't mean genetically dominant. Like obviously tessera is genetically dominant, but TerraZZO is genetically recessive. However, if you pair TerraZZO with something like motley, it looks like a TerraZZO, and if you pair it with something like tessera, it looks more like a TerraZZO. So I just thought it was really interesting that when you mix TerraZZO with other things, it kind of seems to take over with the whole pattern. So I just thought that was really cool. I'm going to cut back into the other video now.
The next two are also really interesting. The first one I want to show you is a scaleless TerraZZO and how different it looks compared to a scaleless stripe. You can still see a little bit of that color fade, but it's actually not quite as different as I expected when I was looking these up. But one of the big things that I did notice is that the scaleless TerraZZO actually seems to show those stripes pretty brightly, whereas a scaleless stripe seemed to not like really show the color contrast as well, which makes sense because when you look at a TerraZZO, you see that nice color contrast on a lot of them between the stripes and the ground color, whereas most adult stripes will be almost unicolor sometimes, and so seeing it in scaleless form is going to accentuate that, and so your scaleless stripe is going to almost look patternless by itself in some cases, whereas in a lot of cases the scaleless TerraZZO is going to show those contrasting patterns a little bit more. The last one that I have on the list is the kind of one thing that breaks our rule of the stripes connecting to the head, and that is with Sunkissed. So when you add Sunkissed with TerraZZO, it looks very different. It doesn't look quite like a Sunkissed stripe. If you look at a Sunkissed stripe, it kind of looks like a sunspot stripe. It's very light colored and has little spots that go down the back. But if you look at the TerraZZO version, the TerraZZO version with Sunkissed looks a lot more like a Sunkissed tessera would. So unless you know you have tessera in the line and you're struggling to figure out if you have a TerraZZO Sunkissed or a striped Sunkissed, a striped Sunkissed, like I said, is going to look very much like a sunspot, whereas your TerraZZO, for the most part, they end up looking much more like a tessera Sunkissed, which is really interesting because when you mix TerraZZO with many mutations, it doesn't really look much like a tessera, but when you mixed them with Sunkissed, it really does resemble how tessera looks like when mixed with Sunkissed. That is going to be it for this month's deep dive. I hope that you enjoyed it. Next month, I'm debating on between either lava or ultra, so let me know in the comments down below which you would like to see more, lava or ultra. I personally love ultra, but lava also has a really interesting background. Both of them have really, really interesting background stories, so let me know which one you guys would like to see. Also, let me know how you feel about TerraZZO after watching this video. Do you like it more or less, or was TerraZZO a brand new thing for you and you didn't know about it, or did it just not affect you at all and you're just, you know, along for the ride? I'd really love to know and read your comments below. Thank you again for watching. I will see you all next week with a book review on Kathy Love's book, The Corn Snake Manual. And again, remember, I will be giving these books away after I review them. So if you would like to get a copy of The Corn Snake Manual, which, spoiler alert, I highly recommend this book. If you would like a free copy of the book, keep an eye out for that video and leave a comment on it. You can comment anything, doesn't matter. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in that video.